The economic history of the Greek world spans several millennia and encompasses many modern-day nation-states. Since the focal point of the center of the Greek world often changed, it is necessary to enlarge upon all these areas as relevant to the time. The economic history of Greece refers to the economic history of the Greek nation-state since 1829. Earliest Greek civilizations. Cichlid civilization. Cichlid civilization is the earliest known civilization to emerge on the Greek mainland. It was of Stone Age culture, and knowledge of economic history is thus limited to archaeological evidence. It seems to have been a small-scale trade in Cichlid art and essentials such as foodstuffs. Archaeological evidence suggests that Cichlid goods were extensively distributed throughout the Aegean region. Minoan Civilization. The Minoan Civilization emerged on Crete around the time the Early Bronze Age. It had a wide range of economic interests and was something of a trade hub, exporting many items to mainland Greece as well as the Egyptian Empire of the period. The Minoans were also innovators, developing a system of lead weights to facilitate economic transactions. Despite this, Minoan civilization remained, for the most part, an agriculturally driven one. Artisans and artists were an important part of the Minoan economy, as they produced many goods that were valued in trade as well as within Crete itself. The Linear B tablets often refer to men at the work, although there were also female artisans, who mainly worked in the textile industry. We also know from archaeological evidence that Minoan artisans practiced a large range of craftsmanship jobs, including scribes, potters, metal workers, leather workers, glass and faience artists, painters, sculptors, engravers and jewelers. Due to only a small amount of evidence about occupation, we do not know whether a worker might have mastered in several trades, or fully specialized in one profession. There was an area set aside for artisans and their workshops in every palace and in town like Milea. They had both workshops in town and in the palace. The production of oil was an important activity in which Minoan artisans were engaged. There were a large number of oil jars found in the destroyed palaces that tell us of the importance of this industry. Oil was an extremely important part of the perfume industry, as it was used to clean dirt from the body, much like soap does today. Perfumes were also sprinkled on clothing for aesthetic reasons. It is certain that perfumes were a luxury item of Minoan trade. The bronze industries were also an important aspect of the Minoan economy, and the art of bronze making was very common, suggested by the fact that evidence of bronze making was discovered in many towns, such as Phaistos and Sacro, but also as evidence in the area of Milea show that bronze making operations were flourishing in many of the palaces. It is believed that the Minoans imported tin and copper to make bronze ingots for other people. Evidence of this is shown in Egyptian tomb paintings, where the captive brings said ingots to the Egyptian king in gift exchange. Other objects made from bronze have been found in numbers at Knossos. These include bronze mirrors, labrys, votive figures, knives, cleavers and small bronze tools. The stone carving industry produced many vases and lamps, examples of which have been found at palaces and palatial villas throughout Minoan Crete. Another industry that contributed to the Minoan economy was the wine industry, which is mentioned in Linear A, but the small amounts referred to suggest it was a commodity reserved for the wealthier class. Mycenaean Civilization. The Mycenaean Civilization emerged during the Late Bronze Age, supplanting the Minoans as the dominant economic force in the area. The Mycenaean economy itself was based on agriculture. The tablets from both Pylos and Knossos demonstrate that there were two major food grains produced, wheat and barley. Agriculture was highly organized, and this becomes apparent by the written records of of deliveries of land produce, taxes in kind due to the palace, a hair set aside for the gods and so forth. The land used for agriculture was basically of two types represented by the terms kotanaki minar and kotanaki minar. The former refers to the privately owned land, the latter to the public one. Cereals were used as the basis of the ration system both at Knossos and Pylos. At Knossos, for example, the rations are quoted for a work group composed of 18 men and 8 boys as 97.5 units of barley. Apart from cereals, the Mycenaeans also produced wine, olive oil, oil from various spices and figs. As far as wine is concerned, it does not figure in the ordinary ration lists and may have been something of a luxury or possibly for export. Mycenaean trade was very advanced and there is even evidence of an amber trade from Britain. Metals were also a very important part of the Mycenaean economy. During the Mycenaean period there were 5 metals in use: gold, silver, copper, tin and lead. Iron was not unknown but was very rare. Therefore, bronze was the main metal for the making of tools and weapons. Although bronze was the most important metal for the Mycenaeans, it was relatively scarce and expensive. Our knowledge of the Mycenaean bronze industry comes entirely from Pylos, where we have some information about smiths. Most of the tablets concerning bronze demonstrate a very tight control of the metal industry by the palace. Hellenistic Age. The Hellenistic Age was a major turning point both in Greek economic history and Roman economic history. It opened the way for trade with the East. New agricultural techniques were developed and the spread of a relatively uniform currency throughout the Near East began. Macedonia. The ancient Greek state of Macedonia rose to prominence in the Greek mainland with the reign of Philip I. Alexander and the successors. Alexander the Great, hoping to strike revenge at a weak Persian Empire for their past attacks in Greece, drove a path eastwards across the Persian Empire, eventually defeating it and opening the way for trade with India, China and other civilizations. This was accompanied by a huge expansion in maritime trade. These trade routes with the Far East were later solidified by the Roman Empire. The economy of the Hellenistic world, however, continued to be overwhelmingly agricultural. Colonial settlement was urban in character in Seleucid Asia, but predominantly rural in Ptolemaic Egypt. Traditional patterns of land tenure predominated in Asia, where large tracts of royal land were worked by peasants tied to it. Much of this land was assigned to prominent individuals, to temple estates, or to cities. The economy of the numerous Seleucid cities, however, followed the Greek model, with land owned by citizens who worked it with the help of slave labor. In Egypt, urban settlements were rare. Outside of the 3 cities of Nocrates, Ptolemy, and Alexandria, all land was theoretically owned by the king, divided into districts, and administered by both traditional civic officials, nomarch, royal scribe, comarch, and by newly created financial offices, the dioikites in the capital, and the oikonomos and his underlings in the nome. In addition, military officials, strategos, hippikos, and hygermon, oversaw the nomes. Royal land was also assigned to individuals, to temple estates, and especially to smallholder soldiers who initially held the land in return for military service, but whose tenure eventually became permanent and hereditary. All land seems to have been worked by native peasants attached to it, chattel slavery being relatively rare in Ptolemaic Egypt. Ptolemaic policy was to increase agricultural production, and innovations in farming were largely the result of royal patronage. We are particularly well informed by the mid-3rd century archive of Zenon about large-scale reclamation in the Fame, where new crops and techniques were introduced, but most innovations, in both Egypt and Asia, were directed toward luxury items and, with the exception of new strains of wheat, had little effect on traditional agriculture. In Seleucid Asia, the major challenge for agriculture was to feed the numerous new cities. In Egypt, to feed the metropolis of Alexandria and to supply the grain used in Ptolemaic diplomacy. In the Greek homeland, established forms of agriculture continued. In most areas, free citizens farmed with the help of a slave or two, while other traditional forms of dependent labor also persisted. Helots in Sparta, serfs in Crete. Changes did occur in the pattern of land tenure, with land being accumulated by the wealthy at the expense of marginal farmers. Roman-era Greek world. The mainland Greece gave way to Western Asia Minor and Alexandria as the economic and cultural centers of the ranging fame owing to the library and its significance in relation to Alexander the Great himself. Pergamum was another famous city in the Roman province of Asia, would become one of the most prosperous and famous cities in Asia Minor, noted for its architectural monuments, its fine library, and its schools. Ephesus too, another large Greek city in the same geographical area, became a major source of trade and competed with the other metropolis of the region for the title of first city of Asia. Byzantine economy. The Byzantine economy was the economy of the Byzantine Empire, which lasted from Constantine's foundation of Nova Roma as the capital of a Hellenized, truly Greco-Roman Empire in 330 to 1453. Throughout its history it employed vast numbers of people in huge industries, particularly in the capital and Thessaloniki, in all manner of trades, such as the silk industry. The early Byzantine economy describes the economy of Roman Empire following the changing of its capital from Rome itself to the newly founded city of Constantinople by the Emperor Constantine I. It was essentially a continuation of the old Roman economy, but with a shift in trade flow towards the newly burgeoning Greek city on the Bosphorus, rather than Rome itself. During the 12th and 13th centuries, the Byzantines were forced to make a few trade concessions to the commercial rivals, the Venetians. Attempts by John Comnenus to revert these trade agreements led to Venetian naval action, and the Byzantines forced to reinstate the trade agreements that were favorable to the Venetians. Late after Constantinople was sacked in 1204, the city continued to bring in trade, albeit with fewer gains for Byzantium. The trouble the Byzantines had was that they needed the Italian fleet to assist them in wars where troops and ships were few. The Byzantines attempted to prevent the Venetians from achieving complete economic supremacy by aiding their opponents in Milan and Genoa, Ottoman Greece. During the period of Ottoman rule, Greeks in both the western coast of Asia Minor as well as Greece proper played an important role in trade, especially maritime. Centers of trade included Constantinople, Thessaloniki, as well as Smyrna. The Ottoman Empire maintained trade routes with the Far East through the Old Silk Road as well as throughout the Mediterranean. Greeks were active in other areas of the economy as well, such as owning coffee shops and other businesses in Constantinople. Following the Greek War of Independence, however, Greeks were deemed to be untrustworthy by the Ottomans, and the privileged economic status was eventually supplanted by that of the Armenians. Still, in the early part of the 20th century, Greeks owned 45% of the capital in the Ottoman Empire despite being a minority. Agricultural development, however, remained stunted until the reforms that followed the Greek War of Independence.